questions we wrestle with as Christians about who God is, how do we live out our faith, what is the Bible, what is the truth of the Bible, what are we supposed to believe, how are we supposed to live? There are really big, deep questions that we ask each other, that we ask God, that we wrestle with ourselves. And that's why the Cultivate Podcast exists, to help us go deeper in our understanding of who God is, His Word, and the way that He's called us to live. Everyone, welcome to the Cultivate Podcast through the Grove Church. I am Charlie Loften, the lead pastor there, and we have with us
Big Gail.
No, not Big Gail. Not Big Gail. Abigail Boone.
Yes.
Producer, friend, creative, all-around expert. And you were just divvying out life wisdom right before we went on the air. I mean, so you're like an expert in everything.
Abigail-isms.
Yeah, and so at some point we'll talk about whether or not Nick Cage should be Snape in the Harry Potter
debating.
TV show, but that's not today.
I think before that we have to debate whether it needs to be English actors or American actors.
Okay. Another day. We are in the middle of a series, or we have been, where we're kind of working our way through the 10 key topics in systematic theology, but we took a little break for the holidays. And if you missed it, last week's episode, we interviewed Evan and Emily McCall, longtime Grovers, been going to the Grove 20 years, longer than I've been here, and have been missionaries in Thailand for the last 10. And it was great. I was able to be with them in person in Thailand, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great interview, getting to know them. If you did not listen to that, if you skipped over it because you're just looking for the theology, I encourage you to go back and learn more about Evan and Emily. You were on the other end. You were kind of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
in spirit. It was awesome.
Yeah. It was
and
really
if
cool.
Nothing else, if you want to see Charlie in a really awesome mustache, just go watch the episode.
That was real too. That was not a prop.
No.
That was
you can grow a mean beard.
Yeah, it was cool. It didn't take me very long.
No.
All right.
It looks great.
So we have, so far in our systematic theology, we have covered theology proper, which is the study of
God,
bibliology, the study of
the Bible,
angelology, the study of
angels and demons.
That's right. And now we have worked our way to anthropology, which is probably, of all these words, the one that gets
most familiar.
Yeah, people know what that is.
Yeah.
And anthropology is the study of
humans.
Yeah, study of humans, which anthropology is its own
study,
major,
degree,
right?
Yeah.
You can get a degree in it, and it means something. It's still the study of people, but with respect to systematic theology, what does the Bible say about people?
Right. It's not a practice of how to study humans. It is a topic of humans.
Right. What does the Bible say about the nature of people? And so there'll be some things that obviously that would be covered in a anthropology class on campus that we won't talk about.
Right.
And probably a lot of the things that we will talk about would not be covered.
Probably not. Especially not in an anthropology class.
And so we're going to spend 3 weeks on this, and we're going to cover 3 things, one at a time. Today we're going to talk about creation. And then we will talk about what does it mean to be created in the image of God. And then we will talk about the fall.
Okay.
In Genesis chapter 3. So we're going to spend a lot of time over these next 3 weeks in Genesis 1 through 3, right? Because that is probably, it sets the foundation, because Genesis 1 through 3 is kind of it's the intro, it's the intro to the Bible as a whole, where you're kind of introing the main characters. Lets us know who God is, lets us know who people are and how they're meant to relate.
Right.
And so if we want to know the most about who we are, go to the beginning.
Which is, I think people's first annoyance is going to be, it's not a textbook.
It is certainly not a textbook.
It's a sweet poem.
It is a poem. Yeah, and some people ask me about this a lot. About it came up the other day. It was somebody texted me. They were, as always, hey, I saw this thing on YouTube.
That's a good intro.
Right? I saw this TikTok. I read this blog post. It was different, 25 years ago when people would say these same sorts of questions. I was in this lecture, I read this book, or I saw this article.
Yeah.
And it's these same sorts of ideas, and it really has to do with how am I supposed to relate to this creation story? How literal am I supposed to take it? And like, what is its purpose? And we have all of these sorts of questions. And to me, when we think about the theology of anthropology, the big question is, why were we made? Not how we were made, but why we were made. Like, why were we made? And so something created us. What was the reason behind that? And once we understand who created us and why they created us, what does that inform us about
what we should be,
our purpose, where is meaning in life found? And we actually got into the discussion on this in our small group on Sunday. For some reason, we were talking about what does it mean to have faith and to trust in God, and then it kind of spun into this a little bit about that faith is I trust God for certain outcomes. Well, what does faith mean to someone who doesn't believe in God at all? And so then we just kind of got into that. And obviously, if we're going to talk about creation, evolution at some point is going to come up in our conversation. And to me, the creation evolution debate, such as it is, and I've been involved and engaged in it in various degrees my whole life, I guess, but the thing about evolution that I feel like is inadequate is it doesn't even seem to be curious about what the biggest questions are. It's trying to answer how we were created, but it fails to answer why is there something rather than nothing. You can say Big Bang, but again, that's the how everything came from nothing. But
why?
Why is there something instead of nothing? If there is nothing beyond what we see, why is there what we see? Why is it? Why is it here? An atheistic worldview that makes the most sense to me is a universe that doesn't exist.
Sure.
Because
otherwise it's just a complete accident.
There's nothing.
Right.
But accident means that there was something that was supposed to happen and something different happened. Like, how were the elements
what were they headed
that
towards?
were there to be exploded at the Big Bang? How were they there? Why were they there? Why is there something rather than nothing?
Right.
And they'll say, well, that falls outside the purview of science. Science tells us how. It doesn't tell us why. If you can't tell me why there's something rather than nothing, you don't have any real answers to real questions. And to me, atheistic evolution is my biggest critique of it is how uncurious that it is about the reality of the universe and its existence. And again, they have significant criticisms against most sorts of overly simplistic Christian thinking.
Right. Well, because some of it is hinged on, you could say faith, but also I think it is innate that we want to know our purpose. And so purpose isn't necessarily observable and measurable like they would want in science, but it is true that it's there. So they could critique that, but
well, I mean,
it's true to every person.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson, who that's his last name, right? Tyson.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he says, the universe does not care. It just doesn't care about you, right? It's indifferent to you, right? Which is theoretically the answer. There really is no purpose in an atheistic worldview. But again, okay, yeah, but the reason you come to that conclusion is because you have not been curious enough to ask the deeper question. Why did the Big Bang happen? Not how, but why.
Right.
Like how, or it's deeper than that. And so you kind of, I guess since everything is natural and just kind of happened by accident, there is no meaning or purpose to life. Well, I'm supposed to be depressed by that. Like I'm depressed by it because it's not a sufficient answer to the question because you have not asked enough questions yet. Why is there something? How did all of the something come to be? And you're like, okay, well, you can tell me about the Big Bang, but you can't tell me about the moment right at the Big Bang. Even that.
Right.
Much less before. Well, before it didn't exist because time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Okay, I'm not trying to get into the theory of relativity and how time and matter come together. I'm just saying, but like that instantaneous moment, there was something instead of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Why? How? And so the answers to these questions that come from secular, kind of naturalistic, it's not that I disagree. It's creation, not evolution, Abigail. Mm-hmm. You're not even asking the right question. You're not asking enough questions for me to care about what you say. It's like, okay, I guess now that somebody else has answered the big questions of why, now I guess we can talk about how and what the Bible says versus what science says about how. But you're in a deficit with me. I feel like I'm in a rant that only I understand. Like you're in a deficit with me to even come to the conversation because you weren't answering the big questions first. Right. You want to come in late. You want to come in after we're trying to figure out really the nature of the universe and why it exists. And you want to come in and say, well, here's how it exists. Here's how it came to be. Well, and because you feel like you can give better answers to how, that negates the bigger questions that
why
philosophy and religion answer, which is why.
Well, I think that to whittle it down probably is if you only approach it with the how, there's still going to be the why question. But if you approach it with why, people may not even be concerned about how.
Right. And I think the older I get to more to that spot where I'm not trying to debate evolutionists anymore.
Right.
I can. And my guess is by the time we finish this, you're going to have a list of 17 questions that we're going to answer 3 weeks from now in a Q&A episode. But I'm less curious about, and less interested in debating the fine points of Genesis 1-3 with what an atheistic evolutionist would say, because if you're not willing to really do the work to really kind of answer the bigger questions, I don't necessarily know if I care what you think about the details.
Do you think that is a growth in people's like heightened view of science though? Because a lot of like, I don't even know where I would start to list it, but like most of the time we don't even, like, you read a book or like I'm watching Silo right now on Apple TV. I rarely am asking how, I'm asking why all the time. But for a long time, the creation story that we see in the Bible was sufficient. And then it seems like people started getting more hung up on the how than the why. Is that like a new development? Has that always been a debate?
No, I mean, I would definitely say that it wasn't until there were people in it from a more secular perspective that were pushing back against it. That it became something, and Christians became immediately defensive. And again, I'm not here to say then it doesn't really matter what you believe about creation evolution, because I think it does matter. I think it does matter what you believe. And again, an evolutionist can come in and say, well, this is how. It's like, why do you believe that this is a how? And it's based on a worldview that says that there is nothing except the universe. Only thing that exists is the physical world. And so all the conclusions that you've come to are based on that idea. There's nothing but this. And to me, that is just an insufficient answer to the deepest question to why is there something rather than nothing? And if your answer to the why is there something rather than nothing is all we know is that there is something, and I haven't seen anything else but the something, so we're just going to assume that only the something exists. Well, then that's, again, now I'm going to start doubting the conclusions that you come to, because your conclusions are based on an insufficient premise, which is all that there is what we can observe. Yeah.
I feel like we should just depend on children to help us see theology, because all they care about is why.
If you can answer all the questions of a 2-year-old toddler, when we will accept your worldview.
You're good.
All right, I'm just going to read Genesis 1, and then we'll just kind of see where we go from here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed, according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it, according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. Let's just pause right there because my mouth's getting a little... What stands out to you most in that story?
I was at that moment thinking about all of the different separations of how he made things distinct from other things and the intentionality behind it.
Yeah. And then what we'll see in days 4, 5, and 6 is that those things that he kind of created, then he fills them. Like, he separates light and day, and then fills those with the stars and suns and the moon. And then he fills the earth and the water, and then he fills the land and all these, and he fills the sky and all these things. So he separates these things, and then in 1, 2, 3, and then in 4, 5, 6, he fills them with the sun and the stars, and then life of fish and birds and land animals and everything. And and so again, this text that I had gotten where someone had saw something is like that Genesis 1 is less concerned about the how of creation, but really more just telling us like who God is and who we are.
I feel like it does show function.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Like you can see God's intention for creation just in the way that he intended it to function, that there would be land, there would be water, there would be day and night, there would be separation between these things. So you can just start to see he's making choices.
Yeah.
This is where you'll get my art brain of I was an art major in college for all those watching, and every single class almost would start with the question of what is art. And most of the time the class would whittle down to when people make intentional decisions to represent something in some way. And in that I hear God making decisions to represent things in certain ways. And so you're seeing the way things function based off of the decisions that he made. Yeah,
and then when he talks, he's going to fill the sky with birds, and he's going to fill the water with all sorts of fish and water creatures, and then he's going to fill the land with all sorts of land creatures. You get a real sense of his desire for diversity and richness,
life,
beauty. And then there's that repeated phrase that comes at the end of every day.
There's day and there's night. And you saw that it was good?
It was good. It was good. Like what he was creating was good. And there's a purposefulness and a goodness to this God. Like he wanted to create something, and he wanted to create something that was good.
Satisfying, I feel like.
Yeah, this is good.
This is good. It's kind of like when you get one of those meals from some place that you didn't expect it to be all that good. And it's like the highest compliment to say like, oh, this is kind of good.
Well, I would say it's really more, if we're going to be more precise, it's when you had to cook for yourself.
You're like, oh,
hey,
this is pretty good.
This is good. This is good. I mean, he's not watching somebody else cook. He's cooking. And so I think, and so again, the person that was saying is like, I agree with you that really the purpose, at least all the way up until the point to where we get towards the end where it talks about creating people, that up until this point, we're learning more about God than the process by which creation was made.
Mm-hmm.
So we see a God of beauty, intentionality, diversity, goodness, obviously incredible power.
Detail.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I was the one creating, I would forget to tell the fish to like stay in the water or something like that, you know? Like he even just in that is the most diverse creation you could ever imagine.
Yeah, and if you go to like a lot of the mythological creation stories, it'd be like, and here's how volcanoes came to be.
Right.
This one god got really angry and this weird thing happened.
Yeah.
And it's like accidents produced out of mistakes or anger, or something wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And that's why the giraffe has a long neck. I mean, it's all these sorts of weird sorts of things.
Have you ever seen giraffes fight?
Have I ever seen giraffes fight? I have not.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we're not.
After this episode,
put a pin in that. Put a pin in that.
Everyone go look it up for yourself. It is fascinating.
My word. Purpose, intentionality, care. This isn't something that he snapped his fingers and just let it happen. Like at each point along the way, it mattered to him what there was, and that everything was full of life, and that it was good. It wasn't accidental. It was purposeful, intentional, and good. And I think that is very, very different than a lot of other sorts of religious mythological creation stories. And again, it's obviously very, very different than what I would say our current 21st century, people aren't going to like this, our current myth on which we are basing how the universe came into existence, which is accidental.
Right.
It's accidental. Something just kind of popped in the universe one day, and all this stuff came out of it and randomly formed all the beauty and diversity and goodness that we see in the universe. And I'm like, that feels insufficient. It feels very insufficient to explain everything that is. You may argue that this is insufficient in other ways, but as far as telling me why not only is there something rather than nothing, but why is there all of this beauty and diversity and just goodness and morality and life.
Well, I feel like it also just shows a ton of intention, because I think with that accidental theory that people can have, that it just like happens, whatever, then you're kind of just aimlessly wandering. But even without it explicitly going into this is how to be a fish and this is how to be the sun, he gives them places to be and things to do. And I mean, like, as I hesitate to call myself a boss, but I do have some people that work for me ish, so I'm kind of a boss. But the worst thing I could do would be hire someone and then not tell them what I expect them to do. Then that's a failure for me, that's a failure for them. And you don't see that in this creation story. God sections them out and gives them a place to be and a thing to do. Well, and if you think about it, and the order matters too. He created a space and filled it with something that belongs in that space. And it is in that moment, this is what God is doing. I'm going to create light, I'm going to create darkness, and I'm going to put suns and moons and stars there. And I'm going to create, the skies from the earth, and I'm going to put birds there, and I'm going to put water from dry land, and I'm going to put fish there. I'm creating spaces, and then I'm going to create entities that fit perfectly there. That is what God is doing. And that is the stage in which we get to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, and says, Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And we will talk more about that when we talk about, in next episode, we talk about what does it mean to be created in the image of God.
But like I create this space, I put the sun there, I put the space here, and I put the earth there, and then I put the birds and the fish and the land animals. I created all of these wonderful spaces and then filled it. And now I have created this thing.
An ecosystem, if you will.
And into it I have placed people.
Mm-hmm. Put a pin in the fact that I want to note that it said an our image.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we've got this beautiful picture of God creates wonderful, beautiful, good spaces and then places things perfectly in them. And then it's capped by this awesome overall ecosystem that he's created. And in that is where he places us.
Yeah.
And so we kind of then get this, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, of obviously the universe was created for God's own purposes.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like we existed and God was like,
I could work with them.
I gotta make something where they can fit.
Right.
He created all of this for his own reasons, both the universe and us specifically. But it seems like, again, following the flow of Genesis chapter 1, that all of this was also created for us, for it to be ours. He created a space, and then's like, now I've got the perfect thing that I want to place there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that just kind of sets up, this creation story then sets up who God is, all the things that we said, powerful, creative, good. But it also sets up for us how he wants to relate to us.
Mm-hmm.
He is a good God who has given us a lot, and he has created us in his own image. We are to be like him and to rule over this place, kind of underneath his overarching rule.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that, just from the very beginning, the power of this creation story is how God views us and what our job is.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so then the question then is asked, I keep coming back to this, right? Isn't that the biggest purpose in the story of Genesis chapter 1?
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I responded back, because I know a loaded question when I hear one. Does that mean that what is shared in Genesis 1 doesn't have to be accurate?
No, you know my favorite quote from this podcast.
No, I don't.
Oh, you do?
I do?
Everything in the Bible is true, but not everything that is true is in the Bible.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Because that squashes that right there.
Right. I mean, something is it the fact that it's poetry and its intent is not to be scientifically precise doesn't mean that what is said is inaccurate.
Right.
And it accurately explains what it explains.
Well, and I think people, like, if I wanted to learn about foster care and what it looks like to have those abandonment issues and then bringing that into your home, I could read the DSM and I could read a psychiatrist's notes about a foster kid, or I could read a book that is like a portrait of someone's life who went through it. Mm-hmm. I think I would probably learn a little bit more about the whys and the emotionals if I just read a fictional story about someone who went through that. And I think people negate the weight that the poetry of Genesis 1 can bring. I always relate it to The Alchemist, that it's not a scientific book, but the whole entire book is an allegory, and you walk away with all these thoughts, but there's nothing scientific in the book. And so you can read and learn about intention, about creativity, about design, and you learn that from poetry, but I'm not looking at it to get a textbook of how to create a world.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying, but but beyond that, before somebody thinks that I'm going even saying more than what I mean, is like I'm supposed to believe then, because it's in the scripture, it's beautiful, it's poetry, this was its primary intent, which is to tell us about God and us and all these things, and I'm supposed to be able to trust that the picture that this Genesis 1 is creating is an accurate picture at least of who God is and who we are. Mm-hmm. I trust that is accurate. Well, can I also trust in what it says God did? Mm-hmm. Well, you can't really, not specifically what he did. If I can't trust that that is what he did, why do I trust the deeper meaning?
Right.
I mean, it's trustworthy or it's not. I mean, again, it's not saying everything, but it is saying saying something.
Mm-hmm.
And that God was intimately involved,
right, with
in the details of creation. That matters.
Mm-hmm. Which when people say that that's like crazy, I'm like, but isn't an explosion just as crazy?
Well, I mean, they're both. That's why it's easier to attack an opposing worldview than to defend your own.
Right.
And that's true in just about everything, especially about something as fantastical as how did everything come from nothing? Because that's what both of the stories have in common as far as the creation story and the evolution story is like everything came from nothing. And one has purpose and someone behind it. And one was like,
just happened.
Just kind of happened.
Right.
They're both fantastical and are causing you to believe something that you would not believe otherwise.
And that you have no idea or you have no capability of proving per se. It's a choice to believe.
Right. And so again, I think it matters. So then people want me to just kind of spell it out. If I want to be a Christian in good standing, how do I combine these two ideas? Right. So what are the minimum because I really want to believe everything about evolution because that makes me smart and scientific. And right now everybody wants to be smart and scientific.
Sure.
Who doesn't want to be smart? I want to be smart, and I want to be anti-science.
Sure.
Whatever that means. I don't want to be that. So again, that the origin of everything comes from God. God is intimately involved in the details, which is different than he made the Big Bang happen and then sat back from a distance and tried to see how it came together. It's like, hey, look, there's an earth, right? Intimately involved in it, including in the creation of life.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing is people are a separate creation from everything else. People did not derive from anything else.
Mm-hmm.
A special creation by God, created in the image and likeness of God.
Mm-hmm.
We are not just an extension of creation. It's like, well, look, it started with these simple organisms and worked its way up to this, and all of this led to human being. Like, no, there is a line in the sand between everything in creation and the creation of people. And so whatever it is you choose to believe about evolution as a process that God used, I think it is absolutely critical to believe that humans are separate from that process, because we do not have great grandfathers that were fish.
Right.
I skip over monkeys because that's
low hanging fruit.
It's too cliche.
Well, I think there's also, though, it does give you confidence to believe that there is meaning to what you're supposed to do, because if it is just an evolving species over time, who knows what we're to become and do. Right. If we're designed for something specific and we're already in that form to do those things that God has called us to do, there's intentionality and there's purpose there.
Yeah. And so, and again, a uniqueness to us because we're created in the image of God. So we were created in the image of God. And then according to the little picture of monkey with the hunchback, and then it gets taller and taller and taller as it goes on, right? At some point, okay, well, this is created in the image of God, but this dude's dad, he was here on this spectrum, and he was just a primitive ape man. And so at some point, God was like, okay, we've gone far enough. Now,
stop growing.
Soul.
Yeah. Well,
your dad's just going to die as a mindless ape, but you have there is clear that there is creation and there's us.
Right.
We were created by God, but we have a unique place in the heart and design of God, separate from all of that.
Because that's the only time it says that created in his image. It doesn't say that for any of the previous things.
Right. We are distinct and unique. And so I say it tongue in cheek this way to people, which is, you can't believe that Adam and Eve had parents.
Right.
So what if I mean, because Adam and Eve, like they were given souls, they were created in the image of God, they were placed in the garden perfectly where death and sin didn't exist. Well, so you place Adam and Eve and say death doesn't exist here. There's no such thing as death. There's only life. And it's like, what about my dad? What about my granddad? What about my great? I mean, at some point, like it just doesn't make sense because death is a consequence of sin.
Mm-hmm.
But if death had been a part of Adam and Eve's lineage forever,
mm-hmm.
it doesn't make sense that one point we just kind of just draw a line here.
Right.
So even if you choose to believe that everything that we learn about how all the different diversity of plants and animals came to be through a natural process called evolution, I don't necessarily believe that. In a limited way, I might. But I believe that we are exempt from that.
Mm-hmm.
We are a unique creator. And I think that is of incredible importance.
Mm-hmm.
As we'll talk about when we talk about the image of God next week, when we talk about the fall in 2 weeks from now, I think those sorts of it's important that we recognize, okay, we don't have to, it's not meant to be a scientific textbook. It's a poem that tells us about who we are and who God is. Great. Then take from it its main point,
mm-hmm.
which is you are not just some animal.
Mm-hmm.
You are unique to the heart and purpose of God. And you are very, very different. So do not insult yourself by putting yourself as the same as a chicken, a fish,
uh-huh.
a salamander, a bird, right? You're not the same as that.
Mm-hmm.
You're made from the same stuff and created by the same God, but you were created at a unique time with a very unique purpose, and that needs to sink in. And so you can decide, producer and question asker extraordinaire, if in 3 weeks you want to ask a bunch of questions about how creation and evolution interface and these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're just going to just glean from it, what do we learn about anthropology from the creation story?
Right.
Unique, a part of, but unique and distinct from creation, with a unique purpose from God, not to just simply be a part of creation, but to be the ruler over it, for whom a purpose was given to fill and subdue the earth and to lead it. That creation was created for God, but it was also created for us,
mm-hmm.
and we were placed into it as opposed to being naturally produced from it.
Right.
And that matters.
Mm-hmm.
It matters, and it doesn't matter to me in particular that science vehemently disagrees with that. And I will fight that one forever. Whether or not every day was a 24-hour day, and how long did it take, and and could a theistic evolution be used in all these other processes? You can make me fall asleep a little bit if you make me debate all of that too long, but I will fight to the death.
Well, I think that does matter, because this is quoting from something totally different, but it's like, would you rather it be on you to find your purpose, or would you rather the God of the universe to tell you what your purpose is?
Right.
And like sometimes on a prideful day, I want it to be me, but truly it's much nicer that there's a creator behind it all that has already implanted that into me.
Well, if it's up to me, then I'm inventing a purpose. It's not really I don't have a purpose. I'm just going to decide what I want to be about.
Right.
But apart from this idea of God uniquely separating us from creation, placing us in creation with an intent to relate to creation and to relate to Him as the Lord of all creation, apart from that, the universe offers us nothing in terms of purpose except for survive and pass my characteristics on to kids.
And a place to play the game.
All right, so we have answered way more questions. We've asked and created more questions than we have even come close to answering. But we've got more time.
Yeah.
We got more time to talk about some more of these things. And again, at least I'm guessing by the time we talk about all your angel questions and all our creation and people anthropology questions, and we have a 2-part Q&A. But anyways, thank you so much for joining us. And I encourage you, again, you may feel like we stopped in the middle there, which we did. I told you in the beginning, it was part 1 of 3. So we're going to talk about some more of these things, and then we'll probably, again, do some Q&A afterwards. But thank you so much for joining us as always. I encourage you to come back as we continue to talk about what does it mean that people were created? What does it mean to be created in the image of God? How does the fall kind of affect who we are as people? So we'll keep that going over the next couple of episodes. And as always, we would love to hear from you. You can find us at thegrovechurch.org/connect. If you have some questions about the podcast, questions you want to ask the podcast, or if you just want to get connected to us as a church, you can find everything there. Thanks for joining us. And also, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Have a great day. Thank you for listening to the Cultivate Podcast. Our hope is that you are taking steps to go deeper in your faith, that you are asking big questions and you're looking for answers. We hope that we can be a resource for you through our podcast and any other way that we can help you. You can find all our episodes anywhere that you can find podcasts, including YouTube. And again, thank you so much for joining us.